Empowered Health, a podcast shedding light on how healing is an inside job. Keys to your inner power and total transformation. Discussing wholeness, wellness, and the effects of the mind on the physical and energetic parts of our being. A podcast to support you, moving from fear and pain into wellness and purpose. Belief, hope, connection, energetic keystones for transformation and inner power. Sacred knowledge that inspires us to look within, to find our own unique path. Empowered Health, release and rewire to become what you truly are, strong, whole, and empowered.
Welcome to the Empowered Mind, Empowered Health podcast, the keys to empowered and heart-aligned living for the conscious game changers with Dr. Jayne. Today we have Laura Clark, founder of the Wise Living Institute. Laura champions others to awaken their wisdom, to step confidently and courageously forward, living one's truth for greater joy and abundance. Laura is a best-selling author, engaging speaker, and founder of the Living Your Truth membership, where one can find resources, programs, and coaching to become who you truly are. Today, Laura is going to discuss with us how to use the 4 elements to center and connect to one's inner awareness. But first, Laura, share your story of depression and how this led you to what you are teaching today.
Jayne, thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to having this conversation with you. I believe that all women and really cool men go through a process of healing at some point in their life. And then from there, they step forward into spiritually awakening that inner wisdom, that truth that lies within, so they can step forward more confidently and courageously. For me, that process of healing was because of deep depression. I had been depressed for probably going on 5 years, and I kept compounding the level of in my life. So, a lot of people go back to their childhood when they start talking about the healing process. I had an idyllic childhood. I was raised by wonderful parents. We had a beautiful foundation, siblings, the area that we grew up in. It was just beautiful. I go back to those times and I just feel warm and fuzzy. So where it started kind of unraveling was because I grew up in such an idyllic place. It was all about, okay, Laura, you got to go to high school, you got to go to college. And in my own mind, it was leave college, work for a few years, find the beautiful relationship, get a house with a 2-car garage and have 2.2 children and live happily ever after. Graduated from college, was really enjoying my life and my profession, so much so that I was overly giving myself to my profession. I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week in a nonprofit and had little or no time to see who Laura was. Right. And I left Laura behind, and that brought me into this. This is all that life is. At 30 years old, there was no really great relationships that had been born. It was a nonprofit, so my salary was not really wonderful. And so it just got to be a very dark and gray space that I was living in. Compounded by the fact that I was doing such a great job that I was recruited to another nonprofit far away from my idyllic home. and I had no support around me. so I just landed in depression, that dark space of getting up, going to work, coming home. I was highly functional. No one at work knew that I had depression. I would get to work. I did a great job, and I would get home and I would crash. But that catches up to you after a while, and it starts leaking into work. And so I started with I was blessed to start with a really great psychotherapist. And I always say that my healing process began with air. So that's one of the 4 elements, air. And he showed me how to breathe, literally. How, Jayne, that deep, deep breath that you take and you go, I was like, I can't exhale. Like he was saying, exhale. I'm like, I can't. That's how I was breathing. I was breathing so shallowly and so deeply. I wasn't even getting oxygen into my brain. So we worked on breath work. And at that point, I realized that I had stepped away from what I find to be the most healing thing that anybody can ever do for themselves. And that's immerse yourself in nature. I grew up where I could walk out the back door and go to a pond 100 yards away. Right? I grew up on lakes. I grew up hiking and catching bullfrogs and hearing that crisp sound of leaves crunching underneath your feet, and literally sitting down on the pine needles under a tree and falling asleep. And just, I loved nature, but I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't getting out in nature at all. So with the support of this wonderful man, we created kind of a game plan that just took me back to my roots so that I could start hearing what I wanted for the first time in my life. And I could stop listening to all of the outer energies of, well, you got to do this, Laura, you got to do that, Laura, you got to do this, Laura, this is life, right? And start listening to my own inner awareness, my own truth, to start that path forward.
Yeah. And, I've been I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I have cases of teenagers that are depressed. And I often ask, how close to nature are you? Because I feel they've lost that connection.
Yeah.
Through the technology of their phones and the pressure of social media, and they're wrapped in their head and they're not connected to nature. So
yeah,
it's huge. And you probably were so connected, and then through life, just in this job, got into your head so much, and needing to do something instead of just being.
Yeah, and that's the doing and the being, right? And so, and everybody kind of gets caught up in the doing. We've got to do, we've got to do, we've got to go, go, go. They forget that the best part of doing is being yourself, right? When you're being yourself, you're doing your own life, and you're stepping forward with a synchronicity of yourself, of source, and being in alignment with nature. And when you have that, whether you're an accountant, whether you are a bookkeeper, whether you are a circus performer, whatever you are, you just enhance that because you're in sync with your own truth. So a lot of times with my clients, they're like, oh, I'm just so go and I'm so programmed, I don't know how to disconnect. And that's where we start, is disconnect to reconnect. And it doesn't take long, right, Jayne? It doesn't take long to say, okay, take that deep breath, close your eyes, take that deep breath, and what's the next best step? And use air, right, to help propel yourself forward. And that's when when things are going well and you have that foundation underneath you. There are other times when you have to literally go out and get fresh air. So when you talk about the 4 elements, one of them is air, one is fire, one is water, and one is earth. And all of those help support you. So when I began this journey, when I was in the healing process of the journey and not into the awakening process, when I was in that beginning process of the journey, I needed to go back to basics. Like, nobody teaches you how to breathe when you're 3 years old or 4 years old, right? No one does that for you. So you have to relearn it. And that's one of the reasons why I believe yoga is so empowering, is because a lot of the yoga instructors will start with that foundation of teaching you how to breathe. And that's air. So it was so funny, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in this process and I was working with my psychologist, and he was talking about, okay, air, go out and breathe, make sure you get that fresh breath of air. I was in with my boss and we were having a meeting. There were 5 or 6 people there, and it was getting emotionally heated, right? And he said, well, let's take a break and come back in 15 minutes. And he said, let's go, everybody else, go get a breath of air, fresh air, and come back in 15 minutes. Leaders know this, so I sat there and I kind of burst out into laughter, and he looked at me and says, what are you laughing at? I said, I'm learning this. I'm learning that you have to take that breath, that breath, and come back with clarity in your mind. And leaders know that. They'll often say, let's take a break, let's go get some fresh air and come back. Because when you can't think clearly, your emotions are going to become exponentially out of proportion with what's happening in front of you. And you won't be able to make inroads into that boardroom, or even with children, right? Yeah. If you're raising children and you're not clear on how to support them in what they're doing, emotions can get a little hectic in the house, right? So if you can remember to take that breath of fresh air, you open the window, get that fresh air in, use aromatherapy so that you can breathe in clarity of whatever essential oil you're using, you're able to make and manifest a better outcome in your life.
Yeah, because when we're breathing shallowly and all these things are happening, we're in fight or flight. We're in like the tiger is right there and we need to run. But as you change that with your breath and what you're smelling, and you go into parasympathetic, everything changes. And like you say, then you're more connected with what you should, like, in the moment, and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So tell us more.
Yeah, and one of the things that was really cool is, in this job I was working with children, and one of my umbrellas, if you will, in this job description was I dealt with the aquatics department with this nonprofit. And so I'm dealing with water all the time. And I loved water. I grew up around the pond, as I said earlier, and I went to camps, and you couldn't get me off of the dock. But by the end of the day, I was just this drenched little creature, and my fingers were all warmed up because of being in the water for so long. And what I recognized as I was going through this healing process is the reason I loved the water is that it connects with our emotional self. It's the second element, and it connects us to our emotions. We are water beings, right? We are made up of more than 90% water. So of course, if you need to soothe yourself, you're going to go to like gets lake and go into the water. Women especially, we have that connection to the moon and the tides and the rhythm of the water on earth, that we can jump in a lake and feel light again. We can get into the shower and feel refreshed. We can, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Jayne, but if you're ever teary or having a really hard time, people say, oh, go wash your face, right? And what they're doing is they're innately trying to calm you down and trying to support you by having you go and refresh yourself with that energy of water. And for me, it's always been there. It's always been the element that I go to when I need to soothe the emotions. The other thing about water, which is really great, is, and have you ever experienced this, Jayne, where you get into the shower and you just let the water run and you washing your hair, and then all of a sudden you get that answer that you've been waiting for that challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's because you're washing away all of the emotions. You're stripping yourself of the physical entity, and you're going back to that spiritual awareness of who you are. And so you're getting those downloads, those hits, that intuition, that awareness that allows you to, if you choose to listen to it, we'll hear it. Now, whether we listen to it and take action on it is the next opportunity that's before us.
Yeah, I've had a few moments. They haven't necessarily been in water, but with quietness, when your mind is quiet, and in nature, always in nature. You'll
Yeah.
get the download, or now they see it as connecting to the unified field, because you're connected in the moment to something that we're all connected to,
Yeah.
So that's
Yep.
yeah. So water is so powerful, and yet we don't give it the gratitude that we should be giving.
Right. And when you think about the human body, it needs water to process, right? And we are often water deprived. I don't know too many people that ever drink truly enough water. They'll get up there in those ounces, right? But they never really get to what they need. And that water helps conduct electricity. It helps conduct everything within us. So not only does it support us spiritually, but it supports us physically at the same time. So, so that's the second element. And so I innately, going through this process, that's kind of like the healing curve. I was like, okay, I'm breathing now. I'm listening to my own inner wisdom. And I have the water, because I was in and out of it 3 or 4 times a day. And I was beginning to feel how soothing it was. And between those two things, I was able to stop the tapes of my mind saying, you're not good enough, you're too small, you're never going to find somebody, you're never going to have your dreams, right? All of those tapes that come up in our brain that lead that heaviness that can lead you down into depression, I was beginning to really hear them for the first time, because they're subconscious, right? So I could bring them into my consciousness, and I could start saying, well, that's not true. I could objectively listen to those tapes and rewrite them for myself. So I went through that healing process. And then I realized that, so the third element that I really returned to connecting with is Earth, Mother Earth, and how much strength she supplies for us. And
just before you go into that, Laura, these tapes that run, we're often unaware of them completely.
Right.
Sometimes I'll wake up in the night and I'll have to sit up in bed and tell myself to stop that tape. That tape does not need to run, and that I have control over my thoughts and will resume in the morning. So I just love what you're saying, because once you're aware, you can rewire in many different ways. Okay.
Yeah. No. And to your point, oftentimes those tapes come up at night. And that's when, the dark night of the soul visits us, and we get into that really heavy, challenging time. And that's when most suicides take place, actually, because the tapes become so heavy that we can't handle it anymore, right? And we want to step out of it. And I was at that point at one point in time where it was dark night of the soul, and I was like, it's not worth this kind of pain to be living here anymore. I got through that night and immediately got extra support. And what I hope is that people hear something like this from your podcast, from anybody who speaks the truth, is that we are all good enough. We are all beautiful, vibrant beings. And that dark nights of the soul come, but you can get through it with simple techniques like the one you said, saying, that's just a tape. It's like like the DVR. I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to put some good music on and I'm going to go to sleep, right? And in the light of the morning is going to give me greater clarity, and just stop those tapes. I often will snap my fingers, right? Because that's what I was taught in my initial healing is when you start thinking that, Laura, just snap your finger.
Well, that's a good tool.
Just snap your finger. So anytime I go back to a tape that says you're not good enough, I just do that. No, it's not that I'm good enough. Right now, you're seeing the challenge ahead of you. You have the strength to go through it, Laura. Yeah. You have the skill set to go through it. All you need to do is stop thinking these negative, lousy, dark tapes that exist. And when you've programmed yourself from when you were a little kid to when you're 30 or 40 or even now, they come back, because they're so ground in us. But as you go through a healing process and spiritually awakening, you can catch it. Just like that. You can catch it and say, oh, there you are again. You know what? I'm going to leave you at the side of the road now. If you catch up to me later on, I'm going to leave you at the side of the road there too. But, there you are. Just, you belong over there, right? So as I was going through this whole process, the next thing I started doing was walking and hiking on weekends. And at lunchtimes, I would disappear from work for an hour and I would go find a really nice trail to just spend 10, 15 minutes on or sit in a park, and really start connecting to Mother Earth. When you have this deep, dark depression, when you are trying to get to that next level of self-awareness, that next thing in your life that you want to accomplish, the confidence factor, right, comes into play. And my confidence was so far down with this depression that I needed to strengthen that. I needed to go back to what I knew where I could find strength, and that's through Mother Nature. Walking on her beautiful planet and touching a tree. I mean, Jayne, you've probably done this. I bet you've gone and just touched a tree.
Oh, I hug them.
And hug them, right? Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, I'm a tree hugger, right? But I had to start because I had to start this new relationship with Mother Earth. And I would just, the first time I can remember walking with my psychotherapist on his property, and he said, just touch the tree. And I'm like, huh? What? And I knew, and he's like, just touch her. And I did, and it was like this jolt of energy. There was too much. It was like this boom. I love you, Laura. And the strength that came out of that tree, I can still remember it. And it took me a little while to get to the point where, oh, I can hold this bark on this tree and feel that strength. And it was like creating a dance with the trees, and beginning a relationship with them all over again from when I was 6 or 7 years old. Yeah. And hugging the trees and getting that energy, and then turning around and putting your back against the tree, right? And you're like, oh, there's my spine. There's my strength. I can stand tall now, right? And that problem that I was just thinking about, and I had the solution. I just needed that strength to know that solution was the right one to take. And so I reconnected with the strength of Mother Earth, and it really is powerful. And now it's not as so my spiritual awakening process has been the last 25 years. And I can remember being in a park and literally hugging a tree about 20 years ago. And everybody looked at you like you were a little crazy. But now if you're on a trail and somebody has their back up against a tree, or they're leaning against the tree, or they're hugging the tree, it's not as odd, right? People, there's more of this awareness around us of people needing to find their center, people needing to find peace of mind now more than ever. right? It's important to find that peace of mind. And you almost say, gosh, look at them. That you go, right? You just go. So it really is. And the angels are confirming that with the bells going off. I love seeing people embracing Mother Earth because I know what they're doing for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. We know these things as kids. And yet when we get into the tailspin of life and onto the hamster wheel, it's almost like we're programmed to do other things away from it. And we wear rubber soles on our shoes, which cut us off from the earth. And so for me, it was like, I learned how through grounding, the power of just laying on the earth again. And I've even healed, emotional pain, but physical pain as well.
Sure.
So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's just strange how we forget these things.
We do. I keep having this conversation with people. I'm like, well, we're told to stand up and take our steps and to start speaking, only to be told to stand in line and be quiet when we go to school. Right? Oh, no, look at her. She's taking her first steps. Go, go, go. Oh, she said her first word. Keep talking. And then 4 or 5 years later, they're saying, oh, you got to go to school. You got to stand in line. You can only speak when you're asked to speak, right? And we're reconditioned out of what we know innately to be true. And we're taken out of the parks and the playgrounds when we were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and we're sitting in front of now, not then, but now, computers for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, and being instructed, and we have to learn. And there's a place for that. I totally believe in education. I come from an educator family. My mom was a librarian. My dad was a high school teacher. And I love education. I love learning new things. But there's a time and place to sit and learn. And then there's a time and place to go connect to nature so that you can assimilate what you're learning and step forward with it. And that's pretty much where I was when I broke from corporate, and I said, I'm done. I'm just done. I don't want that life. It's not giving me the dream that I had, and now I need to go create my own dreams. And I left that. I went back to school, loved school. I became a massage therapist. I learned so much from that, and the ability to connect to people and connecting to my own heart and wisdom through that work and growing and learning. And then all of a sudden I learned about the element of fire, and fire is that place where we can dance with our soul and that connection to spirit. If you've ever sat in front of that fire and it starts crackling and tingling and it starts dancing up, and then it simmers down, right? So you build a fire and it goes, and then it simmers down. And it's in that simmering where you can connect to those embers of your soul and start seeing what is your truth and what you want to do, and really connect to your purpose. Because we are brought down to this earth for a reason. There's a purpose we are put into this physical form that we are here in. And for many, it's everybody said, a lot of people say, I just want to spread love and light. I just want to spread love and light. But it gets more granular than that. And connecting to the element of fire and what you really want to do allows that to start building, and you start hearing with greater clarity exactly what that is. And then you step forward courageously with that. So for me, I loved bonfires as a kid. I loved campfires, of course. But there was one time I had been doing massage for 4 or 5 years, and I went to a retreat and they had a fire, and I actually ended up sleeping next to the fire. And I woke up in the middle of the night and the embers were there, and I just kept hearing the words, awaken your wisdom, awaken wisdom, awaken wisdom. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. I am awakening my own wisdom. I've been doing that forever. What do you want me to do? You know, and I just had to kind of lay it out there and say, Mother Earth, Father Sky, what is it? What is it? And they just kept saying, I kept hearing awaken wisdom, not only that night, but for the next 2 years. And then, you know, have you ever had those V8 moments, Jayne, where you go, I should have had my V8. I've known it all along, right? And I had this V8 moment when I was working with a massage client, but we were having a conversation after her treatment, and we were just talking, and she goes, Laura, you are so good at awakening my own wisdom. You awaken my body when I'm on your table. You awaken my heart when we're having these centered conversations. You're just so good at awakening my own wisdom. Thank you. I was like, that's my purpose. That's my purpose. So my purpose is to awaken wisdom in whatever shape or form that comes in, whether I've got the hat of the founder of the Wise Living Institute on, and I'm working with a private client, or whether I'm walking my dogs down to a river and they're going ahead too far and I have to stop and awaken their wisdom to come back to me. Whether I'm in conversation with my big guy, my man, and we're trying to get to a point, I'm there to awaken wisdom. And once I got that, once I realized that from that fire, those embers that night, and then having to have that VA moment, everything started falling into place for me. Everything. Life got so much easier. So I say this, life got so much easier, and yet it got so much more complex. Our challenges as humans get more complex as we get older. Right? We have to face physical challenges. We lose our parents, other friends go die and pass forward, or we're dealing with COVID, or we're dealing with an election process in the United States. Our challenges get so much more complex, and yet my life keeps getting more and more easy because I'm able to get centered much quicker. I'm able to ease those emotions much faster. I'm able to find my strength in my own knowledge at the drop of a hat. And I'm able to embrace that spiritual energy of my own self and step forward. And when you can do that, even though things are complex, I can find peace of mind in the middle of mayhem. I can find my truth. I can hear my own spirit speaking and saying, Laura, the best answer is this. Laura, this is the next best step for you. Laura, follow this path. You know, Laura, you're a little too emotional. Come back to center. My big guy, he's so cute. He'll often say to me after we're doing a renovation on our house right now. And if anybody out there who's listening to this has ever done a renovation on your home, you know that there are so many decisions to be made. And if you're doing it in partnership with somebody else, there are a lot of conversations to be had. And we've had some conversations where the energy has been elevated during those conversations. And he'll just look at me and goes, do you need some water right now, or do you need some fresh air? Is this a clarity thing you need, or do you need to soothe your emotions? And we just start laughing because he's just trying to infuse it with some humor that we're entering that physical realm where we really need to kind of catch ourselves.
Yeah.
Before we can make the next best choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have those that place where we can always come back to center when you learn the skills. So, and Jayne, you've probably seen this in the work that you've done, that a lot of times you need to come back to that foundation to rebuild again. You have to come back to homeostasis, because you can't make great decisions when things are all aflutter. You
Yeah.
have to come back to that homeostasis.
Yeah. I kind of call it neutral. When
Mm.
you're in a place of fear or hyper, there's, hyper sensations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, going to neutral and connecting to your heart. And change in the world happens within each of us. Like, I think we have to really remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Neutral is great, because without coming back to neutral, I don't know if there's a whole lot of empathy, right? Because you're going off on your own thing, and you're in a way may not be able to see others. And if you come back to, as you've said, that neutral space, you can regain that clarity and find greater empathy, and be able to step forward with greater compassion, and do those things that are your purpose in a way that others can connect to them. Because there are lots of people out there who are living their purpose, but nobody's listening to them, because they're pushing. They haven't connected to their own inner awareness to find the best next step. It's like taking a round peg and putting it into a square hole, right? You push. It's never going to fit beautifully unless you come back to center and say, what's the best avenue for this? What's the best way I can then move forward? And when you can come back to homeostasis or neutral, that you find that square, to put into that square hole, and things fit with greater ease, so that you don't feel like you're pushing through life, but and go back to the beginning, you're not doing through life, but you're being through life. And I don't know about you or anybody who's listening, I don't want to have to be doing through life. I want to be through life. I want to be able to, I keep saying this to a lot of my clients now. What do you feel would bring you greater ability to move through space and time with grace and ease? Whether that's a physical thing, how can you physically move through space and time with greater ease? Or whether that's an emotional, how can you move through space and time with greater ease? Because that's all we have, right? We have space and we have time, and we have movement. I want to be moving through it with grace and ease. I don't want to be sludging through the mud. There's enough sludge and mud out there that when I land in it because of circumstances, I want to be able to move through it with grace and ease and just feel me, that I'm living my truth and I'm being my truth. When I'm doing that, I am much greater. I have a much greater ability at affecting change in the world than when I'm moving and pushing through the mud and the sludge. When I'm moving through space and time with grace and ease, I am a much more powerful and impactful being than when I'm moving through sludge and pushing, and we all have that. See, so I've gone through a healing process, and now I have this spiritual awakening about me, but I am still an emotional, walking, talking human being. Right? So as much as people will look at me and they say, oh, you're so calm sometimes, Laura, and you've got it all together. Well, I like to think I do, but there are times when that altogether has broken down, and I just have to go back to my foundation and say, wait a minute, Laura, hold on. What's the reality here? What's the truth? Listen to those tapes and say, oh, no, you go sit there. You're not welcome back here again. When I was working with this psychologist, Jayne, one of the things that we were working on tapes. And he says, well, what do you hear the most often? I'm like, I don't know. I'm a fat, lazy slob. And he goes, are you? And I'm like, no. I'm a big girl. I've always been a big girl. I'm a big girl. I'm certainly not lazy. Heck, I'm working in a nonprofit for 60, 70 hours a week. I am the furthest thing from lazy. And a slob, well, when you get home and you change really fast, sometimes the linens fall on the floor instead of in the laundry basket. Right? So am I the most clean and minimalist individual? No, I get a little sloppy. So we were reconfiguring that tape, right? I have no idea where that tape came from. But somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that I was a fat, lazy slob. And so I now, one of the certifications that I wear is a Feng Shui practitioner. I'm the furthest thing from slob, right? But sometimes I'll come into my office and I'll look at my desk and I'll say, oh my God, you're such a slob, Laura. And I'll say, whoa, where's that tape?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, go sit down. I'm going to put the pen back in the pen holder. You're not a slob. Right?
Yeah.
So for even the most spiritually awakened individual out there, they still have to come back to their foundation sometimes. And that's one thing I'd love to impart upon your listeners is that don't let anybody out there think they've got it all together all the time, because they don't. They don't. And the people who are really the fun spiritual awakening people will be the ones who say, hey, that's just who I am and I'm okay with it. I've just got to kind of reconnect. And they will tell you their humanness. They will share with you that they're a walking, talking human being. It's the ones out there who don't share that with you, who don't say, oh yeah, when I was a walking, talking human being, but now I've got it all together. Watch out for those people, please. Just put that through your own inner awareness and ask yourself whether you want to align yourself with them or whether there's somebody else out there to listen to. Because I think as far as listening to a lot of people, the best thing to do is listen to somebody's story and where they've come and how they have to revisit that story and unravel that proverbial onion, right? To get new information about themselves. Because what we have in this world is our own self-awareness. And that's just a process. And it's just like breathing. Right? You go back to air. If you can breathe, you can still become more aware of your own self and soul. As long as you're breathing, you can continually become more aware of yourself and soul. And doing that through nature is just so beautiful, right? It's just that ability to take that deep breath, soothe your emotions, and sit with Mother Nature's strength and ask for support. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, everything you're saying is all about taking back your power and coming from a place of inner wisdom.
Yes.
To impact this world in whatever way that is. That's
right. And what's really cool about being able to step into that place that you're speaking of, that being empowered and impactful, is that, and I just lost my thought because I hear a buzzing sound from my contractors. But stepping back into that empowered thing doesn't necessarily have to be a heavy thing like I did with my psychotherapist. And I mean, that was really heavy stuff, right? If you can look at what you're going through and say, I need to find solutions, and step back into that 3-year-old or that 4-year-old and say, is that solution over here under this piece of paper? Is that solution is it underneath my phone? Being creative about finding it and being curious, right? If you step into that curiosity, those answers are going to come because the universe is going to say, oh, they're curious. They're looking under that piece of paper. They're looking under that phone for that answer. And all of a sudden, you're going to open a door, and there's the answer is going to be, because you're curious and you're creative about finding it. So it doesn't have to be so soul heavy when you get to a point of having a foundation to grow from, whether you choose doing 4 elements, using that as a foundation, or using yoga as a foundation, or using meditation as whatever your foundation is, remembering to go back to that, sit upon it, and then step through whatever you're challenged with curiously. That using that inquisitiveness. I just love 3 and 4-year-olds. I just think that they are the most precious beings, because they're standing up and saying, oh, is it over here? Oh, is it over there? They're asking all of those questions, right? And how many questions does a 3-year-old ask in a day? And I had a niece who was 3 once, and I started counting how many questions she asked in a day, and it's like, I'm going to try to ask as many questions as she's asked in the last 2 or 3 hours, and I couldn't even come near it, right? But I tested myself, and I was like, I'm going to keep trying to ask those curious questions. My contractor, so we're doing these renovations, and he goes, Laura, you have 2 questions today. You only have 2 questions. I'm like, there's no way I can live through this renovation with 2 questions a day. So I'm going to ask 1 question that has 18 sub-questions. So those answers come, right?
Yeah. And it's just about asking and curiosity. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. One of so I was a self-proclaimed perfectionist until I was about 42, when I made my first mistake, right? And I didn't ask, because when you're trying to be perfect and you're trying to like live this life of being better than being human, you don't ask questions, because you don't want people to think that you need questions, right? You want to have all the answers.
Yeah.
You want to have all the answers. So I came up with an acronym for ASK that shifted that whole thing, that shifted me into being more curious and more creative, and being able to formulate questions. So the acronym for ASK is A, always, S, seek, K, knowledge. Always seek knowledge. Right? And if I'm always seeking knowledge, I have to ask a question, because otherwise I'm not seeking the knowledge. So once I kind of reframed that, I was like, I can ask a question here. I can ask Jayne how her day was. I can ask Jayne, what do you think about ask? What would your acronym be for that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Because when you ask, yes, you're opening yourself to receiving, and you're also connecting with someone else. And if you're listening in the right way, it's through your heart. And at those moments, the answers can come. So yeah, it's beautiful.
I love that. I love that framing of being, when you ask, you can open your heart to receiving. Because if you can't receive anything, you can't give anything.
Yeah. It's almost like you said too, you had to ask to get, to receive what you should be doing now. I've had to ask as well, like asking, and it's right there mixed in with, there's this stubbornness before you ask, because you think you have to know it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that goes back to that curious thing that the universe wants you to succeed. The universe wouldn't put you down on this earth to fail, because that's not the objective of living. It's to succeed and to be, right? To be. And so the universe is always allowing you, if you open that door, to have an answer. Or maybe not to have the full answer, but to give you a little direction. to give you a little bit of, no, you're on the right path, Laura, but look over to the left. Just look to the left a little bit more. There are always, always, always signs that the universe has given you. That's why I love going out in nature. I work from home, but I'm always going into town in my car or on my bike once a day. I could live in my home 7 days a week and not go out for, 3-4 weeks at a time. But I love to go out because I just say, what do I need to see today? What do I need to see today? And oftentimes I will get this woven answer of insights along the way, whether it's from that VA moment of something just dropping into your heart, an answer, or from seeing a cat scurry across the street in front of my car, which usually means you better slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or there are just so many signs that we can be open to and curious about, that when we understand them, we'll say, oh, there's the answer. Okay, let's go. Right? Oh, there's the answer. Okay, I'm good. This is good.
Yeah. And I love too what you said about being cautious of the people that have all the answers, because that is like a red flag.
Yeah.
The answer has to come from within each of us.
It does. It does. And my clients sometimes will get frustrated with me at the beginning of a session, because they'll ask a question, then they'll say, and don't tell me to go inward to find the answer. I just want the answer from you, Laura. And then we unravel it, and then we go in and we find that answer that is theirs, and then if we have to kind of get a sign for them, I ask them, bring it through your own inner GPS. GPSs are wonderful things, right? They tell you where to go, when to go, how to get there. We have that inside of us. We just need to know how to program it. We just need to know how to, once it's programmed, keep it calibrated. Because there's so many things in the world that can knock us off center, and we have to recalibrate. We have to go back to that neutral that we were talking about, go back to that homeostasis, so that inner awareness, that inner GPS is always on target for us.
Yes. And through nature, it's just perfect.
Yeah. It's nature is, we have our animal totems, we have our fairies in the woodlands, and our woodland creatures, and there's just so much that nature can teach us and tell us, right? So it can have a tiger. You can be walking through the woods and there's a tiger, and it's telling you to back off, be careful, there's a warning sign. But it can also say, well, where's the tiger in you, right? Your tiger is in hiding. And you can get that clarity just through, and most people aren't going to see a tiger walking on their path, but you get the point of, if you see an acorn, acorns are beautiful, beautiful entities. And what do? They go into the soil, and they wait there for a while, and they start growing, and they start growing, and they grow a little bit more, and they push themselves up through the soil, and they start as a sapling, and then eventually they become these beautiful, powerful oaks, right? And so if you see an acorn and you pick it up, maybe you need to be reminded that you are the sturdy, strong oak inside of this acorn, right? Maybe you need to be reminded that you need to nurture yourself a little bit more and be a little bit more self-compassionate. Maybe you need to plant yourself and do one thing really well. What does that acorn tell you in that moment? Because it's going to tell you different things at different times. It's not going to be the same thing all the time. But what does it tell you right then and there? And when you get that answer, it's just powerful for you if you take the courageous step to follow it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know people want to know that they want to know that answer to what is it? What does it mean? So I always ask them to ask themselves three things. What do you need most right now? What are you not needing right now? And if the world were your oyster, what would you be getting right now? And if you can answer yourself those three things, you're going to get that inner wisdom. What is it you need most? What is it you don't need? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be at that moment? And those three answers are going to give you that self-awareness of what it is the next best step is for you.
Right? And you might only know that next best step. I love, and you're like the acorn, because even as it comes up, it's got so much more growing to do, but it's going to become that once you realized it, but to have the patience.
Yeah. And it is patience. It is that, so I started that first deep breath of mine was in 1992. It's been a long and winding road to where I am now. And what's really cool about it is I know less now than I did back then. And I didn't know anything back then. And I know less now. Right? So I'm open and I'm curious and I'm ready for that next best step, because I don't know what the next 20, 30 years is going to bring me. I have the vision, right? But it's not going to be there tomorrow. I don't want it to be there tomorrow. I want to be able to go through this life, right? And see and learn and grow and be. Right? I just want to do it with ease and grace. I don't want to have that mud and that sludge. I want to do it with ease and grace. So I'll find that foundation, always going back to that foundation and allowing Mother Earth and Father Sky to support me in being.
Yeah, perfect. And in that way, you're joyful and in the moment. So perfect.
Yeah.
Any one more? Do you have one more word or nutshell of wisdom to share with us?
One more nutshell of wisdom. Oh my gosh, the choices.
You have so much, right?
I think that the next nutshell is never to feel alone, because you are not alone. You may be by yourself, but you are never alone. If you need support, do the asking, because other people don't know how to find you to give you the support unless you ask. You don't need to feel alone. And even this year, 2020, as we're recording this, is a really heavy year. And because of the way we have been asked to, I call it self-cloistering, because I don't want to call it self-isolating. It's about cloistering in, right? And feeling safe and supported inwardly. It's been a hard year, and it has been full of isolation, but you're not alone. There are so many community groups online in your community. There's one-on-one support, there's group support. In this learning, healing, self-awakening process, somebody else has gone through something similar. Ask for the support. There's so many people out there that will say, I got you. I will jump and I'll be your net. So never ever in this journey feel alone.
Beautiful. And for so many, it's hard to ask, just because we're afraid of showing our imperfection or our need. But you're actually, like you say, there's other people that can have the net and they want to be there for you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. And how do people find you and what you do, Laura?
Oh, Jayne, thank you for asking. They find me at thewiselivinginstitute.com. That is my virtual home. And if you come to there, you can get my ebook. It's actually a really beautiful ebook that I just did the content. Somebody else did the beautiful interior concepts. But it's how to find the signs in your life. and the universal answers. So you can come to the website, get that. It's my gift to you. And that's where you find me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm going to put that in the description with our interview so people can easily find that.
Super.
Wonderful, Laura.
Oh, Jayne, thank you so much. I just enjoy having conversations with people who are doing what you're doing, which is helping others spread this awareness of who they are and empowering them to be.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Yeah. And for everyone out there, don't forget, don't give away your power to anyone else. Just go be you and be the wave.